All right, let's dive into one of the most dramatic stories ever told, the epic of the prophet Elijah. And trust me, this isn't just a simple tale of faith. It's a high-stakes showdown between gods, a story of incredible power, and a legacy that literally defies death itself.
So, our story kicks off in a kingdom it's completely lost its way. Under the rule of King Ahab and the infamous Queen Jezebel, the people of Israel have turned their backs on their God to worship an idol named Baal. But right into this spiritual darkness steps a lone figure, a prophet with a fire in his heart. And that's what sets the stage for our first act, a monumental conflict. We're talking about one man standing up against the corrupt leadership of an entire nation. So, what's really going on here? At its core, this is a deep spiritual crisis. On one side, you've got Elijah championing the God of Israel. And on the other, you have King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who have basically forced the worship of this false god Baal onto the whole nation. It's created this fundamental, dangerous divide. Now get this. Elijah just walks right up to King Ahab and delivers this absolutely stunning proclamation. He declares a drought, a divine judgment on the entire land for its idolatry. And just like that, the skies slam shut and a devastating famine begins to grip the kingdom. But, while the rest of the kingdom is starving, something incredible is happening with Elijah. He is miraculously taken care of. First, he's fed by ravens. Then he meets a widow whose jar of flour and jug of oil just never run out. And when her own son dies, Elijah raises him from the dead. These aren't just little miracles for survival. They're massive demonstrations of his God's power. Okay, so after years of this drought, the time for hiding is over. This brings us to the absolute climax of the story, a dramatic public showdown on Mount Carmel. This is going to be the ultimate test of power. Elijah gathers all the people and just lays it all out on the line. He forces them to confront their indecision head on. He's basically saying, you can't have it both ways anymore. A choice has to be made right here, right now. And you have to understand, Elijah isn't just challenging the king and queen. No, he is facing down 450 prophets of Baal. We're talking about the entire religious establishment of the kingdom. And against those 450 prophets, there's just one man. The odds, to put it mildly, are not exactly in his favor. So the contest kicks off. For hours, the prophets of Baal are shouting, they're dancing, they're even cutting themselves trying to get their God's attention. And nothing, crickets. Elijah even starts mocking them, saying, hey, maybe shout a little louder. Maybe he's on vacation or maybe he's asleep. Then it's his turn. He calmly rebuilds a broken down altar, soaks the whole thing with precious water during a drought, and says a simple prayer. And the response, it's immediate, and it is just overwhelming. Fire from heaven doesn't just burn the sacrifice. No, it incinerates everything. The wood, the stones of the altar, the dust, and it even licks up all the water in the trench around it. Seeing this, that's completely undeniable display of raw power. The people fall on their faces and just cry out in unison. The debate is over. The choice has been made. Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? A huge, incredible victory. But this is where the story takes one of its most surprising turns. It's a journey from the highest peak of triumph to the absolute lowest valley of despair. So after defeating 450 prophets and calling down fire from heaven, Elijah gets a single death threat from the furious Queen Jezebel, and his reaction is just shocking. The man who stood fearlessly before an entire kingdom now runs for his life. He runs out into the wilderness, collapses under a tree, and actually prays for death. The prophet of fire, this man of incredible faith, is completely burned out. He's hit his breaking point, and it shows this deeply human, vulnerable side of him. But he isn't just left there. An angel comes to him, provides food that gives him this supernatural strength, and for 40 days and 40 nights, he journeys all the way to Horeb, the very same mountain where God had appeared to Moses centuries before. And this is where things get really interesting. On the mountain, there's another display of power, a mighty wind that shatters rocks, a violent earthquake, a raging fire. But the text is very clear. God was not in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. Instead, his presence comes after all that, in the form of a still, small voice, a gentle whisper. The lesson here is huge. God's power isn't only in the spectacular fire and fury, but also in the quiet, personal moments.
And in that quiet moment, God doesn't rebuke Elijah for his despair. Not at all. Instead, he gives him a new mission and a renewed sense of purpose. He tells him his work isn't done, and he has a successor to train, a man named Elisha.
All right, so this brings us to the final chapter of Elijah's time on earth. And it's a story that isn't really about an ending, but about legacy and the transfer of spiritual authority. The call itself is so simple, but so powerful. Elijah finds Elisha out in a field, and without saying a word, he just drapes his cloak, his mantle, over Elisha's shoulders. Elijah gets the message immediately, says goodbye to his family, and dedicates his life to following his new master. Now, as Elijah's departure gets close, he asks Elisha if there's one last thing he can do for him. And Elisha's answer, it's bold. He asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Now, this wasn't about being twice as powerful. It was a request to be recognized as the primary heir, the one who would carry on the work with even greater impact. And then the end of his earthly journey arrives. As they're walking along, suddenly a chariot and horses of fire appear out of nowhere, separating them. And in a spectacular whirlwind, Elijah is taken directly up into heaven. It's a fitting exit for the prophet of fire and makes him one of only 2 people in the entire Bible said to have never experienced a physical death. And Elisha's request? It is absolutely fulfilled, right then and there. He picks up the mantle that Elijah dropped, walks to the Jordan River, and strikes the water just like his master had done. And the waters part for him, proving to everyone watching that the spirit of Elijah now rests on him. The legacy has officially been passed on. Elisha's own incredible story was just getting started, of course. But Elijah's departure leaves us with this really big question to think about. Receiving a mantle of leadership is one thing, but what does it truly take to honor and build upon the legacy you've been given?